Have you noticed that certain people never have to ask for respect? It just follows them? Their conversations are rarely cut short, their schedules are guarded, and their presence always seems to carry weight. You might wonder what secret advantage they hold. Is it superior intelligence, wealth, or a dazzling level of success? Strangely, it's none of those. The distinction lies in one deeply rooted principle of human behavior that most people are never taught. It is so deceptively simple that when you finally see it for what it is, you'll feel frustration for not realizing it sooner, but also relief that you can now apply it. Imagine those moments when you stay quiet as someone jumps the line, or when a friend casually cancels on you yet again and you swallow your irritation, or when credit for your idea is stolen and you pretend not to notice. Each of those moments feels small, but they build a pattern. Without realizing it, you're conditioning others to treat you as though your time and value are negotiable. Meanwhile, those who never face this problem aren't lucky. They're applying a principle uncovered centuries ago, one that divides those who lead with authority from those who live by crumbs of validation. The uncomfortable truth is that trying to be everyone's favorite is draining your power. Each time you chase approval, you silently hand away your strength. The pursuit of being liked looks harmless, but the price tag is steep. Every attempt to keep peace at the expense of your dignity makes you easier to dismiss. It's not about motivational slogans or abstract wisdom. It's about predictable human psychology. The more you stretch yourself to be agreeable, the less presence you hold in the minds of others. That's why certain voices dominate a room while others vanish into the background. This imbalance isn't chance. It stems from the difference between those who are comfortable letting go of approval and those who cannot. And the moment you understand this difference, you hold the key to ensuring you're never again treated as optional. Ask yourself, do you want to continue being the convenient backup for others, or will you step into the role of someone who is chosen first? If the answer is the latter, begin with a shift in mindset. Respect over approval. Every person who has brushed you aside or disregarded your presence has one thing in common. They sensed you valued their validation more than they valued yours. Respect is never granted to someone visibly hungry for it. Think about the last time you held deep regard for a person who constantly begged for recognition. The answer is obvious. It never happens. Desperation reveals itself long before words do, and it carries the stench of weakness. When your only aim is to be accepted, you become predictable. People know that even if they insult you, you'll nod politely. They know you'll agree even when they're wrong. They know you'll prioritize them despite their disregard for your schedule. Predictability may sound harmless, but it quickly turns into disposability. Ironically, the harder you try to win approval, the less you're actually liked. Real respect is magnetized not by those who seek validation, but by those who are unbothered without it. Human nature favors what is scarce. We value what doesn't come easily. When you chase approval, you strip yourself of that scarcity, making your worth seem common. A political thinker centuries ago summarized this paradox bluntly. Being feared is often more secure than being loved. Fear here isn't about cruelty. It's about the recognition of consequences. When people know your boundaries carry weight, their behavior toward you shifts. Think back to the figures in your own life who held undeniable authority. The demanding teacher who never accepted excuses, the manager who never let poor work slide, or the friend whose honesty cut sharp but true. What did they all share? None of them depended on your validation for their self-worth. They established rules for how they would be treated, and they upheld them. Contrast that with the people-pleasers who are constantly agreeable but easily ignored. The lesson is clear. If you're willing to bend endlessly, you eventually break. And when others realize there's no price for mistreating you, they lose respect altogether. This is why being universally liked doesn't elevate you, it erases you. You fade into the background of convenience, valued not for your strength, but for your pliability. The individuals who never allow themselves to be disrespected understand something that most miss. Kindness without boundaries invites exploitation. The truth is sobering. People who benefit from your constant agreeableness rarely see you as strong. They might smile in front of you, they might even flatter you, but in private they label you as predictable, safe, and easy to manipulate. This cycle traps millions in silent frustration. They assume that constant politeness will eventually be repaid with loyalty. But reality doesn't work that way. What it earns is neglect, dismissal, and invisibility. Respect is not freely handed out like a token. It must be asserted through the stance that your value is not negotiable. If you spend your energy kneeling before the opinions of others, you'll never stand tall in your own right. The shift begins when you affirm a new standard, power over approval. When you choose to stand firm instead of bowing for acceptance, you change the entire script of how others interact with you. Now that you see why seeking to be liked destroys your influence, consider the alternative, commanding respect, not the surface-level courtesy people show in polite conversation, but the instinctive recognition that makes someone think carefully before dismissing you. The foundation of respect is consequence. If there is no cost to crossing you, people will continue to cross you. Most individuals misunderstand this truth. They believe respect comes from showcasing talent or demonstrating success, but admiration is not the same as respect. Real respect comes when people know that mistreating you leads to loss of your presence, your help, or your trust. When someone speaks to you with contempt and you let it slide, you silently announce that such treatment is free. But when you respond by removing access, you force them to reconsider. This isn't aggression, it's enforcement of value. Those who fail to draw these lines inevitably become safe targets for mistreatment, and once disrespect becomes safe, respect becomes impossible. When you shift the pattern and enforce consequences, everything around you starts to change. People suddenly measure their words more carefully. They become cautious with your time, knowing it has value. They stop assuming you will always bend because they've seen you walk away when disrespected. The result is subtle but powerful. The room feels different when you enter it. Boundaries don't repel people as many fear. They attract the right kind. It's not about being harsh for the sake of intimidation. It's about showing that your respect for yourself outweighs the opinions of others. Once this shift takes place, you stop being the convenient option and begin to stand out as someone worth careful treatment. This is why the most respected individuals rarely explain themselves or beg for recognition. They don't have to. Their standards speak for them louder than any words ever could. The cycle of respect is self-feeding. The more consistently you refuse to tolerate disrespect, the more natural it becomes for others to view you as someone untouchable. And once this perception sets in, it strengthens itself. Each new interaction either builds on that reputation or tests it. If you hold the line, the respect grows. If you waver, it crumbles. This is what separates those who rise into positions of authority from those who remain sidelined. Respect isn't simply demanded, it's reinforced through consistency. When you start to carry yourself with the certainty that your time and worth are non-negotiable, you no longer leave gaps for others to exploit. Those gaps once gave manipulators their openings. But when the door is closed, their tactics fail. And the beauty of this process is that once it begins, the weight of maintaining it lessens, because the world adapts to your new standard. But here lies an essential truth. Every interaction you have is a negotiation for control. Who guides the flow of the conversation? Who decides what happens next? Who influences the overall outcome? Approval seekers surrender this control constantly without realizing it. When you adjust your behavior to avoid disapproval, you quietly place someone else in charge of your decisions. Each time you silence your opinion to avoid confrontation, you hand over control of your voice. Every time you agree to something against your will, you surrender your choices. The cost is greater than momentary discomfort. It's the steady erosion of your autonomy. Meanwhile, those who detach from the need to be liked maintain their control. They speak plainly even if it stings. They make decisions based on principle rather than expectation. They set the rules of engagement instead of passively accepting someone else's terms. This is the hidden battleground of power, and most lose it without ever noticing. When you depend on others for validation, you hand them the keys to your emotions. Think of it like a remote control. You've given them the device that changes your state of mind with a push of a button. A compliment brightens your mood. A criticism drags you down. Their approval dictates your peace of mind, while your own standards sit forgotten. That's why people in desperate pursuit of approval are so easy to manipulate. They'll change their opinions to match the room. They'll sacrifice their principles to fit in. They'll agree to things that harm them just to avoid rejection. But that isn't connection. That's a subtle form of enslavement. Freedom comes when you no longer rely on anyone else's nod to feel worthy. When you decide that your approval is enough, every interaction shifts. You gain the leverage because nothing can be dangled in front of you to force compliance. The moment you step outside the approval trap, manipulation loses its grip. People who once pulled strings discover they can no longer predict your reactions. Their guilt trips fall flat. Their attempts to shame you bounce back. Their emotional tactics become useless tools against someone who doesn't crave their acceptance. This unpredictability unsettles them, but it empowers you. Instead of asking what choice will keep others happy, you start asking what choice aligns with your values. This clarity simplifies decision-making. Relationships change as well. The ones that were built on control crumble, but that's a blessing rather than a loss. What remains are genuine bonds forged on respect, where both parties interact as equals. Shallow ties vanish, leaving space for depth. The phrase once spoken by a thinker centuries ago rings true. Most people only see the surface, but very few ever know the core. When you stop performing for an audience, your core emerges unshaken. Your craving for validation is not harmless. It functions like an addiction. Every like on social media, every compliment, every piece of approval delivers a chemical rush inside your brain. Dopamine gives you a high, just as a substance would, and like all highs, it fades, demanding another fix. The cycle grows endless. Soon people around you notice this pattern. They realize that if they sprinkle approval here and there, they can guide you like a leash. Want you to work extra? Praise your dedication. Want you to overlook bad behavior? Compliment your patience. Want to borrow resources? Flatter your generosity. Without realizing it, you've made yourself a puppet on strings pulled by anyone clever enough to exploit your need. It's not their kindness fueling you, it's your dependency fueling them. And once they know which buttons to press, they control you without force. They only have to give you just enough validation to keep you hungry for more. The painful reality is that validation is cheap to distribute but expensive to rely on. People give it sparingly because they know it hooks you. And when you're hooked, you'll bend until you break. This is why approval seeking turns dangerous. It leaves you vulnerable to everyone. Manipulators never have to use threats because you threaten yourself with the fear of disapproval. In contrast, those who don't need validation are immune to such tricks. You cannot manipulate someone who is indifferent to your opinion of them. You can't bait them with compliments or sway them with flattery because their self-worth doesn't rest in your hands. That's why such people often appear unshakable. They aren't immune to feelings, but they've severed the chain that ties their confidence to outside praise. This independence makes them formidable. They decide who earns their respect rather than scrambling for scraps of recognition. Their strength lies not in arrogance but in detachment. When you internalize this truth, a new kind of freedom takes root. You realize that the respect you've always desired isn't something to beg for. It's something to demand, not through shouting, but through silence, standards, and boundaries. Every moment you choose respect over approval, you reinforce your power. Every time you hold the line instead of compromising for acceptance, you solidify your influence. Respect becomes the currency of your interactions, and unlike validation, it never devalues. People begin to shift around you, careful not to waste your time, cautious not to take liberties, and eager to remain in your good graces. You no longer chase after recognition. It arrives naturally because you've stopped offering yourself cheaply. And in that transformation lies the core of true authority. Those who understand it command rooms, shape outcomes, and carry themselves as though no one else has the power to define them. People will throw compliments your way as if they cost nothing, because they don't. Words like "you're amazing" or "you're wonderful" can be spoken lightly, without effort, and often without meaning. But here's the dangerous part. If your self-worth depends on hearing those words repeatedly, you begin to crave them like oxygen. The more you lean on that external praise, the more you surrender control of your inner state to whoever is willing to feed you the next dose. You become reliant on others for the very sense of yourself, and they hold the power to withhold or grant it at will. A thinker centuries ago warned that when people abandon reality for illusions of what they should be in the eyes of others, they rush headlong into ruin rather than protection. When you bend yourself into the shape that others prefer, instead of holding to what you actually are, you sacrifice your strength. Slowly, without realizing it, you erase the authority you once had over your own life and hand it to anyone bold enough to decide your worth for you. Consider how this unfolds in practice. The person addicted to approval never stays the same version of themselves for long. In one circle of friends, they hold a certain opinion, but in another group, they take the opposite stance. They bury thoughts that may be unpopular and put on whatever mask seems most acceptable at the moment. Piece by piece, they stop being a person and become a collection of disguises. The result is hollow and exhausting. By contrast, the individual who is detached from the need for external validation carries the same identity wherever they go. Whether in a crowded room or in private, they present the same beliefs, the same tone, and the same core. They do not shrink from disapproval, and they don't polish away the rough edges of their honesty. Ironically, this refusal to wear masks is what makes them both respected and genuinely liked, because people can sense the weight of authenticity. What approval chasers never understand is that the very act of needing constant acceptance is what pushes real respect out of reach. Escaping this cycle is not smooth or simple. Your brain resists with everything it has. It whispers fears into your mind. If you stop seeking approval, you'll be rejected, you'll be isolated, you'll lose everyone. It scolds you with guilt, suggesting you're cruel or selfish if you stop caring what others think. It tugs you back toward the old cycle because the brain clings to familiar rewards, even if they're destructive. Breaking free requires discipline stronger than habit. You must choose deliberately and repeatedly to stop chasing approval, even when every instinct urges you to run after it. It means allowing yourself to be disliked, misunderstood, and criticized without breaking. It demands that you weigh your own voice above the combined chorus of others. This is the path where freedom begins. If you want to plant the seed of this transformation, affirm it clearly. My validation comes from within. From that root grows the mindset that no one else gets to decide how valuable you are. Now let's move into principles that shift theory into reality, the tactical rules that turn a person from overlooked into respected. These are not abstract philosophies. They are proven strategies that separate those who are dismissed from those who command presence without demanding it. Rule 1: speak less, act more. The majority of people flood conversations with words, explanations, and justifications. They over-communicate, thinking clarity will protect them, but what they actually project is insecurity. They try to convince others instead of showing results. Those who command respect flip this pattern. They stay silent until their words matter. They let their actions demonstrate their stance without rushing to explain or soften their choices. If disrespected, they do not lecture. They simply withdraw their presence. If boundaries are crossed, they do not deliver speeches. They enforce consequences. A strategist long ago said the lion terrifies predators, while the fox survives snares. To thrive, you must be both. Cunning when subtlety is required, and strong when strength must be displayed. Rule 2: never pursue approval. This is one of the hardest rules because the pull of being liked feels almost irresistible. When someone withdraws affection, the natural urge is to chase them, to explain yourself, to overcompensate. But every attempt to run after someone's approval signals desperation, and desperation drives respect away. When you text repeatedly with no reply, when you beg for clarity from someone giving you coldness, when you attempt to win back interest that has been withdrawn, you showcase weakness. The antidote is indifference. If they respect you, fine. If they don't, that is their loss. By holding your ground without pursuit, you invert the balance. They begin to wonder why their opinion carries so little weight, and curiosity turns into respect. Indifference is not cruelty. It is strength, and that strength is magnetic. Those who cannot be swayed by the tides of approval often find that others are drawn toward them without even knowing why. Rule 3: remain calm when under attack. Provocation is a weapon. People insult, mock, or needle others in order to seize control of the emotional field. If you respond with anger, defensiveness, or outbursts, you've handed them proof that they can pull your strings. They win not by the insult itself, but by your reaction to it. The person who maintains composure robs the aggressor of that power. Coldness, neutrality, or even quiet amusement sends a message louder than shouting ever could. You cannot be moved. This psychological armor unnerves manipulators because they depend on emotional control. To watch someone remain unshaken is to realize they cannot be owned. The calm presence becomes a fortress, and every observer learns the same lesson. This person cannot be rattled. Power grows in silence and stillness, not in noise. And those who can laugh at attempts to provoke them stand taller than those who shout in their own defense. Rule 4: never become predictable. Predictability is a blueprint for manipulation. If everyone knows exactly how you'll respond, they can orchestrate situations to push you where they want you to go. Predictably, kind people are exploited for their kindness. Predictably, harsh people are avoided but never truly respected. The secret lies in controlled unpredictability. Be generous sometimes, but not always. Be accommodating in moments and unyielding in others. Be sociable when it serves you, and solitary when it doesn't. This inconsistency keeps others off balance, reminding them that you answer to no formula. Respect blossoms from autonomy, and unpredictability safeguards it. A statesman centuries ago put it plainly: if you must choose between being loved and feared, fear is safer. But here, fear means uncertainty. the recognition that you cannot be taken for granted. The respect this generates is not built on cruelty, but on the knowledge that no one can map your reactions well enough to control you. Rule 5. Enforce boundaries quickly and quietly. What makes boundaries real is not their existence, but their enforcement. When someone violates your line, your response must be immediate and proportional. Long explanations or repeated warnings weaken the lesson. A quiet consequence teaches far more than a lengthy justification. Remove access. Deny privileges. Withdraw presence. Then move forward without lingering. People learn faster from decisive, silent action than from lectures. Every time you hesitate, explain, or forgive too easily, you water down your boundaries until they become suggestions rather than rules. But when you show consistency, that one violation is enough to trigger consequence, your reputation shifts. Those around you understand that your lines are not painted in sand but carved in stone, and that reputation spreads, protecting you even in rooms where you aren't present. Respect multiplies when people know your limits are not to be tested twice. Rule 6. Master the use of scarcity and distance. Most people assume that constant presence increases their value. They say yes to every request, show up at every invitation, and reply to every message instantly. They believe endless availability equals importance. The truth is the opposite. Scarcity is what gives anything value. A rare gem is treasured. A common stone is overlooked. Your time, attention, and energy operate the same way. If you're always accessible, people take you for granted. They stop valuing your yes because they assume it will always be given. They stop treasuring your presence because they believe you'll never withdraw it. But when you make yourself less available, your worth rises. People begin to treat your time as a privilege. They respect your attention as something that must be earned. The less you distribute yourself, the more valuable each appearance, each reply, and each act becomes. Strategic distance is not cruelty. It is conservation of energy that multiplies your power. Scarcity creates an upward spiral. The less accessible you become, the more people crave your presence. The more they crave it, the more respectfully they behave to earn it. The more respectfully they behave, the more selective you can afford to be. But this requires courage because some will disappear when you no longer serve their convenience. That is not loss. It is cleansing. Those who vanish were never invested in you, only in the ease of access you provided. The ones who remain, the ones who respect your selectivity, are the relationships worth keeping. Beyond relationships, distance grants clarity. Constant involvement in others' emotions muddies judgment. When you step back, you gain perspective, free from the noise of endless demands. The strongest leaders often appear detached, not because they lack care, but because they guard their emotional bandwidth. Clear decisions require space, and space requires restraint. Scarcity is not absence. It is strategy. It tells the world that your value cannot be squandered. When you begin applying these principles, change arrives quickly. Relationships evolve. Some will resist the new you because they can no longer exploit you, and they will drift away. Others will embrace you more deeply, drawn to the authenticity and strength you now embody. Confidence builds, not the fragile type tethered to applause, but the steady confidence that rests on unshakable self-respect. Decision-making becomes simpler because you are no longer chasing consensus. You are following conviction. Opportunities arrive because people trust those who stand firm. Your stress declines because the endless task of pleasing others falls away. The greatest transformation is psychological freedom. You stop living as a mirror for everyone else's expectations and start living as the architect of your own life. As one strategist observed long ago, titles don't honor men. Men honor titles. Your worth is not assigned. It radiates from how you hold yourself and how firmly you refuse to let it be undermined. This journey will not always be comfortable. The temptation to return to old habits will arise whenever boundaries are tested. Doubt will creep in when someone accuses you of being too cold, too distant, too firm. But discomfort is the price of evolution. Every time you enforce a line, every time you stay calm under attack, every time you choose silence over justification, you strengthen the foundation of respect. On the other side of this discipline is a version of yourself you may not have met yet. Someone who doesn't need to demand respect because it flows naturally from their presence. Someone who attracts loyalty without chasing it. Someone who wields power without begging for it. The world overflows with people desperate to be liked. It is starving for people who command respect. The choice is yours. Will you remain among the former or rise into the latter? The path is open, but only you can take the steps.